recently I realized that countertransference applies not only to the therapy room, but also we experience it in our life outside of therapy. We just didn't know a word for it. You know that feeling when you're around certain people and suddenly you feel like you're not yourself, as if you're not pretending to be someone else, but like something inside you shifts and you become a version of yourself that you don't totally recognize. So what's happening is actually something that therapists have known about for over a century. Somehow we don't really talk about it in a way that makes sense for regular life. So part one, what happens in the therapy room in terms of countertransference? Let me start with where this was discovered. Back in Freud's days, therapists started noticing something weird. They'd be sitting with a patient, doing their job, staying professional, and then suddenly they'd feel something intense. Maybe it was some irritation or tenderness or anxiety, and it seemed to come out of nowhere. And at first they thought, oh, well, I'm just having a bad day, or I must be triggered by something from my own past. But eventually they realized that this wasn't random, because the feelings were too specific, too connected to a particular patient. Let's say you see 5 people in a day and you feel totally fine with 4 of them, but with one person, suddenly you feel incompetent, or maybe you feel rageful, or maybe you feel this overwhelming urge to run and rescue this person. That's countertransference. Here's what is technically happening. The patient is unconsciously communicating something that they cannot put into words, something they've repressed, something they can't even feel themselves because it's too painful, or it's too dangerous, or it is too shameful. So instead of feeling it, they make the therapist feel it. This sounds strange, I know. Stay with me. I'll explain it further. Let's say you're a therapist and your patient, your client, had a mother who was secretly deeply depressed but who'd never show it. She had to be perfect, had to hold it all together. So this patient grew up around this ocean of sadness, within that ocean of sadness, but it was never acknowledged and it was never spoken about. So this client or patient learned to not feel it, not see it, because they had to survive. And it's difficult to survive if you are constantly swimming in this ocean of sadness. And now this client, this person is in your office and they're talking about something totally mundane. Like, let's say they're talking about what they ate for lunch. And you, the therapist, all of a sudden start feeling crushing sadness. And it's so strange. You feel heavy, you feel sad, and you think, where is this even coming from? This person seems totally fine. They're talking about burger they ate. They're not talking about anything sad. But that's the point, because they're not consciously talking about anything sad, but their unconscious is screaming sad. And because they can't contain that feeling, they can't hold it themselves, it leaks out and gets into you. It can be projective identification, when they're projecting their repressed feelings into you and then you identify with it. You become the container for what they cannot feel themselves. So here's where it gets really technical, and this isn't just the therapist being empathetic or intuitive. It's an actual psychological process of communication, because the client is unconsciously doing something to evoke this feeling in you. They might be speaking in a particularly flat tone, or their body might be held in a certain way, or their facial expression might be signaling sadness. There are thousands of microsignals that communicate, I need you to feel what I can't feel, and I feel sad. And good therapists learn to use this, because instead of thinking, why am I suddenly so sad, and pushing it away, they think, well, this sadness, maybe this belongs to my patient. Maybe this is information. And then they can say something like, as you're talking, I'm noticing, I'm feeling this sadness or heaviness. I wonder if there's some sadness underneath what you're describing. So often the patient will suddenly tear up, or their face will change and they'll say, oh my God, yes, I didn't even realize. That's the magic of it. The countertransference, therapist's feeling, becomes a bridge to something that your client couldn't reach on their own. But here's what's important. It only works when the therapist has done their own work. If the therapist is full of their own unprocessed grief, they won't be able to tell the difference between this sadness is mine and this sadness is my client's. It will be difficult for them. They will be kind of sinking in this sadness, or they'll shut down, or maybe they'll start avoiding feeling it, or they will start getting anxious because they don't understand what's going on. That is why therapists are supposed to be in their own therapy, why they're supposed to do self-reflection on a regular basis. And this is why we say that you cannot stop therapy, you can only put it on pause. Therapists need to know themselves well enough, and that when a feeling shows up, they can ask, is it mine, or is this something that I'm picking up? And it can be both, because sometimes the patient's unconscious material hooks into the therapist's unconscious material, and then it gets really difficult and can get messy for the therapist. And this is when we need to have supervision, so we can discuss this feeling that we're having and trying to understand whether it's ours, or how can we untangle what's yours and what's your client's. When it works, when the therapist can receive these projected feelings and make sense of them and give them back to the patient in a digestible way, then it becomes transformative and lets the patient feel things that they've never been able to feel, or they did feel them, but they didn't know where it was coming from, and they start learning things about themselves that they were not seeing. As I always say, therapy is for us to discover our blind spots, because then we can change what we know. Here's what people rarely talk about, and it's happening all the time, everywhere, with everyone. We are constantly swimming in each other's unconscious material. I have my favorite example. Let's imagine you're a woman, you generally like yourself. You feel pretty, you feel worthy, you feel good in your own skin. That is your baseline. That's when you're regulated, when you're in your own energy, you like yourself. Then you meet two women, both are similarly attractive, both are smart. On paper, they're equivalent, but with one of them, you suddenly start feeling small, unworthy, thinking about your cellulite, like you're not enough, thinking about your pimple, like you're invisible, insignificant. And with the other one, you feel expanded, you feel more yourself, you feel even more beautiful, and you feel more worthy, you feel loved, you feel seen, you feel celebrated. So what is happening? Similar women. The first woman, the one who makes you feel small, or the one in presence of whom you feel small, most likely has something inside her that she can't feel, can't acknowledge, and it's getting projected onto you. My guess is that she feels small and she feels unworthy. But it's very difficult for her to see that. Maybe she was raised to be confident or never show weakness. Maybe her survival depended on being perfect and composed. Maybe she has this image of herself as someone who has it all together, and any hint of inadequacy is too threatening to her. What happens to those feelings of smallness and unworthiness? They don't just disappear. They have to go somewhere. And they go into you because you're empathetic, you're sensitive. This is projective identification in real life. She splits off the parts of herself she cannot accept, the parts that feel inadequate, vulnerable, maybe not good enough, and unconsciously, and it's important, she's not doing it on purpose, she unconsciously puts them into you. And because you're human, you're porous the way we all are, you can pick it up. And suddenly you are carrying her feelings that she doesn't own. So the thing is that you're not making it up. You're not being oversensitive. You are genuinely perceiving something real. You're feeling her unconscious. Now, if you had really solid boundaries, if you were a therapist who'd done years of work, you might be able to feel that and think, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's not mine. That's something that she can't feel herself. And you could stay in your own sense of self. But most of us aren't therapists sitting in our office with clear roles. Most of us are just living our lives, meeting people, and we don't have the framework to understand what's happening. Even therapists outside of therapy room can, get something that they don't really need and mix it up with their own material. So when those feelings hit us, we think that they're ours. We think, oh, I guess I'm not as confident as I thought. I guess there's something wrong with me. And then we can start acting differently. we start acting small because we feel small, and then this is the really interesting part. She starts feeling better because she successfully put the bad feeling somewhere else. She's offloaded it into you. And as long as you're carrying it, she doesn't have to. That is why some people seem to feel better in your presence while you feel actually worse. Because they're using you as a dumping ground for their disowned parts. Once again, not consciously. Now, the second woman, the one who makes you feel expanded and loved, she is doing something completely different. Most likely, she has done some of her work. She actually likes herself, feels worthy, and she's not splitting off those parts. She can hold both her strength and her vulnerability. She can hold her worthiness and her moments of doubt. She is integrated. And when you're around someone who's integrated, who owns their wholeness, there's no weird pressure coming at you. There's no demand that you carry something for them. Instead, you feel space, and there is room for you to be fully you. Actually, she even might be doing something like the reverse. She might be radiating her own sense of worthiness and expansion, and you're picking up on that, and it's giving you permission to feel the same way. It's like she's modeling, hey, it's safe to be big here. It's safe to be radiant. I'm doing it and nothing bad is happening to me, so you can do it too. That's the thing about projective identification. It can work both ways. Someone can project their good feelings into you too. That only happens when they actually have good feelings that they can access and feel. If they don't feel worthy, if they're out of their capacity to feel love, then most likely they won't be able to transmit that to you. So here's what I want you to get away from that. When you walk into a room feeling good about yourself and then you leave feeling terrible, something happened. Something was transmitted to you. And 9 times out of 10, it wasn't about you at all. You didn't suddenly become unworthy. You didn't actually shrink. You picked up on someone else's repressed material. And because you're sensitive, because you're attuned, you felt as if it were your own. The question is, what do you do with that information? Well, first you have to learn to tell the difference between your feelings and their feelings. And that takes practice. It takes building that muscle of self-awareness where you can check in and ask yourself, did I feel this way before I walked in this room? Or did this start when I was around this particular person? If the feeling is new and it's not consistent with who you generally are, there's a good chance that it's not yours. Second, you have to learn not to take it on. This is not easy because there's something in us that wants to help people. When someone unconsciously hands us their pain, part of us wants to carry it for them. We think maybe if we feel it, they won't have to. Maybe we can fix it for them. You cannot fix it for them. That's the brutal truth. You cannot fix it for them. You carrying someone else's unworthiness does not make them feel more worthy. It just makes 2 people feel bad instead of 1. If anything, it enables them to keep avoiding their own feelings. The most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to hand it back. Not in a mean way, not by saying, this is your crap, deal with it, but by not absorbing it, by maintaining your boundary and staying in your truth. I am worthy. I am enough. That feeling of smallness is not mine. Sometimes it means you have to limit your time with people who consistently make you feel bad. Because if someone hasn't done their work, if they're constantly projecting their disowned parts into everyone around them, being around them becomes exhausting. It's like being a therapist who never gets any rest. The beautiful part, though, is when you understand this mechanism, when you can see it happening, it actually gives you so much compassion. Because that first woman, remember, who made you feel small in my example, she's not doing it on purpose. She's not malicious. She is in pain. She's carrying something inside her that is exceptionally unbearable. So she has to split it off and put it elsewhere. If she ever gets into therapy, if she ever does her own work, she'll eventually, hopefully, be able to feel those feelings. She'll be able to say, oh my God, I've felt unworthy my whole life, and I've been running from it, and I've been making other people feel it instead of feeling it myself. And that awareness will change everything for this person. But until then, your job is not to carry it for her. Your job is to stay true to yourself. Come back to your baseline. In my next video, I'll talk about how you can tell what is yours and what is theirs on specific examples with specific techniques. Take care.